Hi. Okay, today's topic, why I stopped eating meat. Point number one I want to make is that everything I'm going to share are my personal thoughts and feelings. And so I would ask that you would please listen with an open mind, or don't, but be respectful if you feel to comment below, because I imagine I might say some things here that could ruffle some feathers. So proceed with respect and compassion. The next thing that I'll say is that I don't think that a vegan or vegetarian diet is required for good health. I think to claim that is to simply be dishonest with the facts. There are cultures and people all over the world who eat animal products and live long, healthy, happy lives. And so I want to be clear that I am not of the opinion that animal products equals poor health. I do think here in the West, we eat far too many animal products and very low quality, poor quality ones that absolutely impacts people's physical and spiritual health. And so I'm not suggesting that it doesn't matter, that it doesn't matter whether or not one eats meat or animal products in general, but just to say that I do think that there can be a place for them in a person's overall healthy diet and life. So I wanted to make mention of that. And I'll also make mention of one more thing before I explain why I don't eat meat, which is that I also don't think that a person is inherently less spiritual or compassionate because they eat animal products. I see a lot of messaging like this from vegans, and I simply don't agree. I think that, like any topic in the entire world, things are very nuanced and complex. And I think of indigenous people, I think of people who are living off grid, I think of people who are homesteading and living very, very close to nature. And I think that there are many people, many cultures who are deeply grateful and live in a very prayerful state of gratitude for the lives that they take for their sustenance. And so, there's just so much that could be said about it. But I think that, is the vegan or the vegetarian who eats a diet predominantly of processed foods or foods that come shipped from across the world that use an immense amount of resources, making an always more ethical or spiritually empowered choice than the person who is quietly living off the land, growing much of their own food, raising chickens, occasionally slaughtering a cow, and doing so again in a very peaceful, grateful energy. This is part of the thing that I felt could ruffle some feathers. And I don't know the answer to that. Again, I think that it's complex, and I think that, and we all, are making the best choices that we can with our individual perspectives at any time and our situations. But my point just being that to generalize that a person who eats animals is inherently less conscious, because I see people making these claims. Maybe you've never heard this, in which case I'm glad that you're free from having been exposed to this idea. But I see people making this claim, right, that the only compassionate way to live, the only spiritually minded way to live, is to never consume any animals or animal products. And I just personally don't think it's that simple. With that being said, I myself choose not to eat animals. I do not eat meat, and I have not eaten meat now for 10 years. And I'm going to read a brief passage, just a little paragraph here, from the World Peace Diet, which was and has been an influential part of why I stopped eating meat and why I have continued to not all these years later. So I recommend reading this, The World Peace Diet. And this passage reads this: the most universal spiritual teaching found cross-culturally in virtually all the world's religious traditions is based on the truth of our interconnectedness. It is presented both positively in what we refer to as the Golden Rule, to do unto others as we would have them do unto us, and more neutrally as the law of cause and effect, that whatever we do unto others will rebound to us. So simply stated, we can never expect to be happy if we cause suffering to others, to be free if we confine others, to be healthy if we cause sickness in others, to be prosperous if we steal from others, or to have peace if we are violent to others and cause them to be afraid. That kind of sums it up for me. I don't know, I could stop the video right there, and that's really it. I think that, really simply put, I don't want to play a role in suffering and death. And so I don't eat meat because I could not find myself, within myself, the ability to slaughter an animal. I live in Amish farm country here in Pennsylvania, and there are cows right outside my window here, and they're so beautiful. They're so peaceful. They seem like just big, friendly dogs. In fact, they're so afraid of me and my family often when we're walking around the block. And so they're just beautiful creatures. And there's just no part of me that can imagine walking up to one of those cows and slicing its throat and cutting it up and eating it. I just personally could not do that, and feel that if I'm personally unable to do that, that I also should not allow another person to do that and to pay another person to do that by buying meat and consuming meat. And so I don't feel that I want to play a role in any of that. And I think that many people underestimate the impact that they have on the world, the potential impact they have on the world, right? Who am I as one person to stop eating meat? Who am I as one person to make this choice or make that choice, right? Does it move the needle in any direction? And I think yes, absolutely, 100%, because at the end of it all, everything is energy. Everything is energy. We are energy. Our choices are energy. And so everything has a ripple effect. My choices, my energy, choosing love and peace and joy on my plate, in my home, in my life, impacts the entire world in a very profound way. And I often think of many spiritual teachers, religious leaders throughout the ages, and they very often preached messages of peace and ate vegetarian or vegan diets. And so, I could go into all of the health benefits, and if that's an angle that you would like to approach, I recommend reading the China Study by Colin Campbell. That was a very compelling read for me for why animal products were not only unnecessary for physical health, but in some cases quite detrimental. But for me, it really is more of a spiritual matter more than anything else. I don't want to kill. I don't want to cause suffering. I don't want to enslave. And the reality is the majority of animals live in factory farms here in the United States, and they are enslaved, and they are treated horribly. They're abused, impregnated against their will. Many don't see the light of day, and are terribly frightened, I imagine, as they're led to slaughter. And again, it's all energy that we consume, right? I don't want to participate in that world, and I don't want to consume that fear that they must have felt, that adrenaline that ran through them. It's just bad karma, right? We reap what we sow. And so I choose to sow what I feel is to be more beautiful choices in my life. And I know someone maybe in the comments might say, okay, but there are more ethical ways, right, that we can consume meat from smaller farmers. And I think that is a step in the right direction. Absolutely. I don't personally do that. But my parents are some that do that. They buy from a local farmer, and their cows live in a beautiful pasture, and they live long lives, and it is better. But it's still death, right? And so anyway, this video doesn't have to be longer than what it is. It really is that simple for me. I don't want to play a role in suffering and death. And so if you are currently toying around with the idea of eating less meat or going vegetarian, I will say that I think that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You know, I think sometimes people feel that they couldn't imagine cutting out meat or dairy, all animal products altogether. And okay, you don't have to. I think choosing meatless Mondays is a popular thing for people, or just incorporating more plant-based meals in your diet is a beautiful thing. And just observe how you feel, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. I found myself so much more connected to myself, my intuition, to God, since I stopped eating animal products. And so I would encourage you to just test it out for yourself. Tune in and ask yourself if it really feels good to play a role in the death and the suffering of so many creatures across not only the country, our country, but the world. And if you're interested to read the World Peace Diet, I think it's a quite enlightening read, and to just see how it sits with you. So yeah, I'm gonna just end it there. I hope that maybe that gave you a little something to think on, and thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts on this. Again, respectful comments, please, only. And yeah, that's it. Okay, bye.